Hi everyone, I'm here again to talk about Bungie's new extraction shooter, Marathon. I posted another video on Marathon's reveal day covering a lot of in-game mechanics and asked you guys to leave more questions for me to answer in the comments. So here we are. If you haven't watched the reveal day video, I highly suggest you hop over and watch because it gives a good overview of core game mechanics that might help you understand some of this video and the questions that I'll be answering. All right, first question. Is this tied to the original Marathon game in any way other than the name? The short answer is yes, but I don't know enough about the OG Marathon to know what to look for on the maps. But the good news is I have some different info that may or may not answer this. Sorry. I wanted to start the video off with this question because I very recently got the go-ahead to talk about a map that I played in my first playtest at Bungie. This map was on the Marathon ship. I triple checked that I could talk about this because we were told several times not to, and I got nervous, but the map I played is the reason I started getting really hyped about Marathon. Please keep in mind that I played a very early iteration and nothing I say is meant to guarantee that this is going to be released or come out. I don't speak for Bungie. This is just part of my experience that I'm excited to share. The map was very gray box, but what you did on the map was what was exciting. This map essentially felt like it had raid mechanics. It featured several rooms with sets of enemies, and in each room there was an enemy that dropped a key, I think. This key would take you to the next room and so on. Eventually you got to what I assume was one of the boss objectives and you fought to kill for an artifact. I actually don't really remember a lot of this. It was so long ago. We also had very limited time on that map and it was the first playtest I ever did, so it was, yeah, again, just a long time ago and a little bit fuzzy. The point is, I think the game could potentially tie a lot more into the OG Marathon lore on this map to satisfy those that were feeling a bit underwhelmed with the connections shown during the reveal. Side note, seeing that map and seeing more complex mechanics to progress through the map brought me back to like my Destiny raiding days and it got me pumped. Again, I have no clue what they have planned with it or if they're even going that route, but if they do, I think that's what's going to set it apart from other extraction shooters. All right, next question. Can you elaborate on the open area gunfights? It looks a little battle royale in the fields. Can you elaborate about how it feels in those moments? You are absolutely right on the open area fights feeling a bit battle royale-ish. But I think a lot of that comes down to bad map knowledge and honestly, lack of skill. I had quite a few, if only I had done this moments looking back at fights where I just put myself in a bad position. I suspect until people know the map well and use their abilities as intended, we're going to be seeing a lot of those. But the good news is there's not a storm or a circle closing in to force you into a field. So you can avoid them if you're playing strategically. I think those situations exist in any extraction shooter you play until you get used to the map layout. Look at Suicide Field on Shoreline in Tarkov, or literally anywhere on Woods. It just takes time and practice. Next question, is there a public playtest coming? Yes, April 23rd. You can sign up for the closed alpha on the official Marathon Discord. It is NA only though. How many contracts can you have at a time? Is it one total or one per faction? Are there negative repercussions for other factions if you work with a different faction? Contracts! I'm a bit surprised I didn't talk about this more in my first video. But each faction offers their own set of contracts. Unfortunately, you can't accept more than one contract total at a time. I wish it was at least one per faction, but at this time, it's just one. I do want to elaborate on contracts overall though, because I think this is pretty important to progression with each faction. When you unlock a faction, they will have a few different contracts that you can actually choose from. But there are 3 kinds of contracts that are in that deck of things you can choose from: priority, boosted, and standard. As far as I can tell, priority contracts are what progress you through the contract line or the quest line. Standard contracts are standard and give a small amount of XP with the faction. So what are boosted contracts? Well, first of all, they typically give more XP, but believe it or not, you can actually loot contracts for the factions in game. These just take up 1 slot in your backpack and the contract gets added to the deck when you exfil. I do want to reiterate that this was during my time playtesting and they could change this up, but as of the last playtest, there were still lootable contracts. I also want to note that I remember finding different tiers of contracts in Raid. And since you don't see it get added to the deck after you exfil, I'm not sure if that means that you're including both standard and boosted contracts. Another quick side note about contracts, you can see your teammates' contracts in game. This is such a nice quality of life thing. You can wrangle your teammates to get their stuff done or be the one being wrangled. Last note about teammates and contracts. I found that a lot of the killing contracts were actually shared progression. And what I mean by that is if you have a contract to kill 7 UESC in a certain compound and your teammates killed 4, those 4 should count for you, which is kind of nice. So you're just not fighting over AI to kill. Completing a contract for one faction does not negatively impact your standing with another. I'm so sorry, I forgot to answer that at the beginning. I do want to go into our next question since it's relevant to faction contracts. Will I be able to max out all factions for upgrades? What does leveling do for you? So 50 is the furthest along that I got into leveling during one of the playtests I did, since we have to start over with each new build. But I was definitely making great progress in each faction tree. In my playtests, my runner level didn't have anything to do with upgrade nodes within the trees. However, I think runner level might have something to do with unlocking new factions, but don't quote me on that. We covered this in a previous video, but each faction has their own upgrade tree. You unlock sections of each tree with both faction levels and materials. For example, you might upgrade each part of a branch, then still have the next node showing is locked, even though you've done the previous nodes. If you hover over that node, it will likely tell you that the next node requires Traxxas level 3 or new caloric level 2, for example. The best way I found to level factions is to focus their priority contracts and just play the game. Certain in-game actions actually give you faction XP. For example, downing a runner during the playtest gave me plus 25 Traxxas XP. Killing a UESC scout commander gave me plus 5 Traxxas XP. So my guess is that Traxxas really just wants you to be a little murderer. Alternatively, looting a container would give me plus 1 Cyber Acme XP. So maybe Cyber Acme might be more loot focused. Just pay attention to what's popping up when you do stuff in game. Lastly, as far as I can tell, you aren't locked out of any specific upgrades if you have the faction level and the mats for it. But again, I only got to 50 and I haven't gotten to explore that further. Can you choose what map you load into? Yes! Next question. When you kill an enemy, it displays plus X amount of XP and plus X amount of currency. What is the currency and what is it used for? Are there traders? How do you buy, sell, and trade? So what you're seeing is your overall XP, and the other part of that you see pop up is actually your faction XP that we talked about previously. But there is a currency in the game and it's called credits. You use credits to buy things like meds, guns, consumables, and other items from the black market. The black market grows as you unlock the ability to buy higher tier items via the upgrade trees in each faction. That's why I was so adamant in the last video about factions and the upgrades, because they kind of dictate everything in the game. Some of the higher tier items that you buy don't just require credits. Some require mats as well to make a purchase. Think of this like in Tarkov, if they said, oh, you can't just barter this, you need to pay a monetary fee as well. That's sort of the system they have in place at the moment. The black market is your one-stop shop, and as you unlock nodes in the faction upgrade trees, their part of the black market grows. You don't actually use the faction pages to buy anything besides your upgrades. Will there be runner customization? For this question, I urge you to go and listen to what Kevin Yanis said in our interview. It's the video I posted before this one. It sounds like they plan to do skins. I'm not really sure what the plans are past that. Are weapon attachments and mods purely stat increase, or are there deeper mechanics? Please elaborate on the weapon mod system. Alrighty, this has been a very hot topic in feedback sessions and during the reveal. As of the last playtest, weapon mods were not swappable, and if you wanted to replace one mod with another, the old one got destroyed. If you wanted to remove a mod, too bad, you're stuck with it until you can replace it. But in a recent interview, the last video I posted before this one that you should definitely go check out if you're the one asking questions like this, I interviewed a developer. He was very insightful. His name's Kevin Yanis. He mentioned that this iteration was part of an economy test in that build, and it doesn't necessarily mean that's what we'll be playing in the closed alpha. So that gives me a lot of hope that they listened when we were begging them to change this. To answer the first part of the question on if they are purely stat increases, yes and no. Most weapon mods you find are going to be purely stat increase, no deeper mechanic. However, there are gold mods. I have yet to find one, but apparently there's some crazy ones that completely alter how a gun functions. So it'll be cool to find those and play around with them. I'm sure there's going to be crazy builds that people are going to come up with. One of the devs told me about one that you put on a pistol. It essentially turns it into a pocket sniper. And I instantly thought of a video I saw going around in Halo Infinite where someone had a sniper scope on their pistol. So maybe it's something like that. Also, a quick note on weapon mods. The mods you have on your weapon actually dictate the rarity level. So that's why I pick up gray weapons that I do like, because I know once I find mods, I can increase its level. How many weapons are there? Will there be unique weapons that won't be moddable? I believe there were 16 base weapons. I have not heard of or seen any unique weapons that aren't moddable, but again, in the playtests, I had pretty limited access to high tier loot rooms. I'm hoping to progress further in this next playtest, but even getting to level 50 was a grind. So if we have less than 2 weeks, I'm gonna have to get lucky with finding keys so I can loot those areas. How does reviving players work? Is it unlimited? Does reviving someone consume anything? For this topic, I'm gonna give you guys the current game mechanics, then kind of go into my thoughts on what should change, because I think some of the res mechanics should be adjusted a bit. Please keep in mind that later on, those are just my opinions, and you're welcome to respectfully disagree. We're all going to be peaceful here. As of right now, it is unlimited and it does not consume anything. It's just free. If they are downed and you res, they come up and need to heal and replenish their shields. So if you're down and someone reses you, you have to full heal everything. However, if you get full killed and you are in your little bag on the ground and your teammate reses you, you come up with full health and shield. Not only that, but if your teammate started that res and got interrupted for a second, then went back to resing again, the res wheel kind of saves your progress. So if you only stop it for a second, your progress is still there where you left it. But the longer you're away, the more that wheel regresses. Finally, if you kill a runner and there's a paper doll symbol above their bag, that means that they still have a teammate up. If you kill a runner and there's nothing above the bag, that means you squad wiped. You should be safe. Okay, let's dive into my feedback on this. I think the fact that it doesn't start the res over at all is a little bit OP, but we'll see how it plays out. I kind of honestly wish they would remove the down state entirely. Go ahead and allow people to res if they get full killed, but if you die, you should just kind of full die so you're not just bleeding out, giving your teammate a bunch of call outs. I like extraction shooters because the lack of knowledge creates intensity. Lastly, I don't want a paper doll above bags in general. I like the rush of asking myself if it's safe to loot or if there's another teammate lurking somewhere. Those are just my thoughts as a Tarkov player, and I know that there are players who will really appreciate how the game is currently. I just hope they find a good balance so it doesn't end up feeling like Apex in fights. While I'm on the topic of my personal opinion, I still think that the TTK for runners is a bit high for an extraction shooter, but it has improved from previous playtests. Are there any unique bosses on the maps like Hunt or Tarkov? Are there scav runs or a BTR mechanic? There are mini bosses around the map. You can kind of see visual cues that they're strong, and then obviously their shields are better. In this last playtest, some of them were covered by large red shields, like bubbles, and you needed a consumable to go in and fight them. I wouldn't say there are unique bosses in the sense of them having like a special ability, but I could be wrong on that. They just seemed like harder, cooler looking UESC. There are no scav runs or BTR mechanics at this time. Is there an insurance system? Not at the moment, and I'm not sure if they plan to add it. But I do want to note that if your teammate brings you something into raid and you exfil with it, it's getting sent back to your teammate via the mail system. So no free kits, kiddos, sorry. How is the performance FPS? Are raids like Tarkov where everyone starts at the same time, or is it like the cycle? Performance was good, but again, that doesn't really mean much during a play test because there aren't that many people playing. The closed alpha is going to give us a way better picture on performance for everyone. And yes, the raids will be like Tarkov where everyone starts at the same time. What happens after a sponsored kit if you keep running out of money? This is another question that I had asked Kevin Yanis in our dev interview.
Yeah, so it depends on your value of your vault, right? So if you have stuff to sell, we'll ask you to do that to purchase a sponsor kit. If you're under that threshold, if you're just, if you're crashing out, you will get sponsored kits that will provide you with stuff. And as you progress through the progressions, you'll be able to upgrade the contents of those sponsored kits so that you can kind of raise your floor a bit. I know I personally have had nights where if it wasn't for the sponsored kit, I would have crashed out, but like it kept giving me stuff. And I'm like, all right, well, I mean, this is effectively a zero cost run. So why not? Why not hedge my bets? Why not try it out?
Can all runners use Riot Shield or just Locust? Just Locust. Weather variety. Will it be dynamic? The weather in game right now is variable with variable fog and storms. I swear it can be sunny in the game. I've seen it. Another note on weather, apparently when it's raining, your heat capacity increases, which is really cool. So it takes you longer to overheat. There's also an implant that reduces your heat when you're sliding in water. That might not be relevant to weather, but it made sense in my head. Is looting similar to Tarkov where you loot minor components and use them to craft bigger items? How do you feel about the loot system? How do you feel about looting AI? Looting is not like Tarkov, where you loot some smaller items, then take them into your hideout and craft them into other things. I went over it a bit in my first video, but you pretty much loot runner implants, shields, guns, consumables, mods, materials, keys, ammo, backpacks, contracts. It can be loose or in containers. Obviously, most higher tier loot can be found behind locked doors, but some compounds sometimes have a red flare on a corner of a building or just placed randomly in the compound. These red flares indicate that there's special loot containers nearby that drop higher end items. It's like a mini locked room that's not locked. I like pushing flares a lot if I'm running a base kit because, again, they just drop some pretty helpful stuff. It's also the only place I really find self-reses for some reason. Also, a side note on locked rooms, as of the last playtest I did, if you find a key on Dire Marsh, it's actually a key that you can only open on perimeter. There's pros and cons to this system. One pro is that it's pretty unlikely that the room you want to open is going to get contested if you manage to get it onto the correct map. The con is if you find one in raid, you have to get it out. You can't just kind of find a key and be like, yay, I get to go open a locked room. There's also one more category of things that you can loot, and it's just called valuables. All of these just auto sell when you exfil for credits, and I kind of hope that they take the auto sell option away because I kind of love having like a little mini savings account hoarded in my stash. It doesn't really serve any purpose to me other than a dopamine hit, but I just personally really love watching my money go up. How did you feel fighting players with better gear than you? Did you think you had no way of winning, or did it feel balanced? What do you think of no skill-based matchmaking? I'll start with skill-based matchmaking question. Having skill-based matchmaking is rough in an extraction shooter because you can kind of manipulate your level to cater to what you're trying to do. A good example is Hunt Showdown. For those of you that don't know that game, Hunt is an extraction shooter that ranks your skill in a star system, going from 1 being the lowest to 6 being the highest. Anytime I get into 5 and 6 star lobbies, I just start throwing. I don't like playing in those lobbies. It's just unfun. And a lot of people that are quote unquote good at the game play way differently than I do, even though I got myself to the same level. I just like more scattered skill levels in a game. I usually put myself back into like a 4-star lobby because it's just more balanced. I still see 6 stars in there, but I also see 3 stars in there. It makes the fights kind of fun, to be honest. On to the first part of the question, asking about how it felt fighting players with better gear. It's hard to answer because, again, the playtests were pretty limiting and PvP was scarce. This last one was the only time we had full matches every game, and we all were fresh accounts, so no one really got to get into any crazy gear. With the gameplay I have under my belt, I can say that I think a solo going against 3 geared dudes will be impossible. Again, I think TTK needs to be lowered a bit to give the little guy a chance if he's landing his shots. One thing I love about Tarkov is that I can go into a match with a Mosin and wipe 3 mega geared dudes if I'm hitting my shots. And I want this game to have that opportunity as well. Have you played any other maps? Do they play differently, and are the PvE enemies different on those? How big are the maps? How many maps are going to be released on launch? I have played 3 maps total: Dire Marsh, Perimeter, and the map on the ship that I can't remember the name of. Dire Marsh is largish, but kind of flat. It's comparable in size to Customs in Tarkov. It's bigger and has more playable landmarks and points of interest. Perimeter is smaller, but still medium largish. I'm so sorry for these size units I'm using. I just don't know how to describe maps. But Perimeter has more vertical playability, in my opinion. I think that they're planning to release 3 on launch. I don't know what the 3rd map will be. As far as different PvE enemies, map to map, I didn't really notice anything different map to map besides the actual map itself and the availability of lower tier loot on Perimeter. I think Perimeter had mostly like the beginner loot stuff. That's really the only differences I saw besides the obvious. Thank you guys very much again for taking the time to put some questions in the comments. I wanted to get a decent amount put out sooner rather than later, but I still see more questions coming in. So if you would like another video answering questions to go even in further detail about things, please let me know in the comments and include what you'd like to ask. Again, this format's very, very new for me and I'm excited to keep learning. So any feedback is greatly, greatly appreciated. Have a great day, guys.